Welcome to an episode of Palmer Village's Palmer Voices, a personal story project preserving artifacts and diverse personal accounts of life in the villages of Palmer. Stories of ordinary people are extraordinary. The history, the stories, and the artifacts from each village over the decades are what make Palmer unique. Brought to you by the Palmer Public Library, MPAC TV, and other local organizations. Funded in part by grants from the Leo S. Walsh Foundation and the Palmer Cultural Council, a local agency, supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. We hope you enjoy this Palmer story.
Beverly Russell was born in Auburn, Massachusetts, then came to Palmer at 7 years old. Her dad built a house on Strong Street. They later moved to the Lake Thompson area. Beverly has an adventurous spirit, fueled by a wanderlust that prompted her to break free from local everyday expectations to experience the new and the unknown. I am Lisa Gagne, here for Palmer Village's Palmer Voices. Beverly is here with me today, and she has brought along several pictures and documents to share with us. These represent some of the many milestones and events in her life and in the town of Palmer. Beverly, introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Beverly Russell, and as you said, I was born in Auburn, and we moved here very early in my life, and my dad's father passed away, and he owned Yellow Cab Company in town, so my father decided that he wanted to come back and take over the cab company.
Palmer was a really thriving town when you were growing up.
Oh gosh, yes, we had umpteen stores. Main Street was just crammed. We had a really nice dress shop. We had 4 shoe stores, 4 pharmacies. We had a theater on Main Street and a theater on Central Street. We had a little fruit stand market on Main Street also. Yeah, it was really a busy place. We had a little airport even, and a lot of people don't even know that, but we did have a small airport, and it was primarily individually owned planes. They would, come and fly like on weekends and stuff. South Main Street had Better Brushes, it was called. It is still in business under the name of McLeod. And then we had Jarvis and Jarvis, and they made like casters for chairs and things. And they're not in business any longer. Then we had the wire mill, which was probably the biggest hiring place around. It was on Route 20, just after Shearer's Corner, and that was a very, very large place. But yeah, we had quite a bit of business. Capital Cleaners, yeah, they're still in business in the same place. And I guess I threw everybody a curve when I said, remember the tower? And everybody went, what tower? And I said, we had a tower behind Capital Cleaners. And it was during the 50s, the latter part of the 50s. And we did plane spotting from there. I did a few shifts. We would do 1 hour, 2 hours at a time. And it was our job. We had binoculars, a phone, and the walls were covered with all the silhouettes of planes. So when you heard a plane coming, you grabbed your binoculars and you ran out and tried to identify it. And then you had a phone you would call and pass it on to the next person, the direction the plane was going.
Now you went to the Park Street School, then you attended Palmer High School.
Well, I went to high school at what is now Converse Street School, which was originally the high school. And the high school, we kind of outgrew it, I guess. Kitty corner from Converse Street, there's the old school. So that took kind of an overflow from 2 or 3 different classes. But the problem was that in the middle of winter, you had to be over there, and at your old class, you had to be there on time of all of them. And then they'd say, well, wear your coat. Well, we didn't have time to go get a coat. So you would, just duck your head and run across in the snow. And then, of course, in the summer or spring, it got hot, and then you're out there roasting. So, yeah, that was lots of fun.
And you mentioned a few of your favorite teachers.
Well, I had one favorite teacher. She was just really, really good teacher and a nice lady. And she taught bookkeeping and related business practices. She taught that. Her name was Annie Murphy. We had other teachers that were fine, but she was outstanding to me. You had to pick out of three. You could pick like the commercial or the general course or the like college prep course. That was all you had to select from one of those.
And during the high school years, what are some of the fun things you did at Forest Lake, for example?
We had roller skating at Forest Lake and swimming, and they had dances there on certain nights. But I would work there on the concession stand, and I worked on roller skates because my boss would come when it was a couples only skating thing. She would come and release me so I could skate one with my boyfriend, which was kind of fun.
You mentioned the high school grounds.
During the summer, when we were on vacation, the grounds were not locked out. Yeah, I mean, you could still use the grounds. So we would go and play softball there. I had a ball, somebody else had a bat, somebody else had a glove, and we just shared, and had a good time. And we rode our bicycles, and we went and waded down to the Quabog River, and, we did lots of fun stuff outside. But it was safer than what it is now. They didn't have to worry about us quite so much.
The 1955 flood.
Oh, yeah, that was a biggie.
You have many, many memories of the flood.
I do indeed, yeah. We were at Lake Thompson, and Lake Thompson has one road that goes both ways. One ends up at Route 20, and the other one ended up down on Route 32, down near Breckenridge Street. It started in the afternoon where it got really bad. And so I was driving cab to help out because so many people were trying to get somewhere. So my mother was down at the cab office, and my dad said, take her home and then call me from there, and if I have something else for you to pick up. So I said, okay. So I took her home, but we went up the back, what we called the back road, which was from Route 20, and it was blowing and raining so hard that the tops of the trees were brushing the top of the car as I was driving through. So I got my mother up there and dropped her off and called my dad, and he had one more pickup off Route 20, so I went to get that. Well, that was great, but coming out of Route 20, now I have to make a left turn, and I can't see anything. So I got out of the car, and I ran it to the end of the road, and I listened, and I looked, and I didn't hear or see anything, so I ran back in the car and jumped in and took off, And then in the morning, we wanted to go downtown and see how much damage had been done. So we drove to go the Route 32 because it was paved down to the route. So the Mass Pike was being built at that time, and they had this huge trench that they had been digging out. It absolutely, totally filled with water, and it was right up to the top of the road. And so I'm, driving along, and I stopped, and my dad said, well, I guess we're not going to go this way. So we turned around and went back to the house, and he got a shovel, I got a shovel, we got my sister to drive. She got the gravy job, she got to drive. And so I walked in front of one tire, and she walked in front of the other to go down to Route 20 because it was an all dirt road, and we knew that it would, have washed out areas. we just walked our way down there, filling in holes as we went. And then when we got downtown, it was like we had this neat waterfall that Bridge Street came up to Main Street, okay? And there was a railroad trestle that went across. And that whole back area behind that had just totally flooded. And the water was coming up to the railroad trestle and then coming down like a waterfall and going back in again. So it's just like a rotation of this water. So it was pretty impressive.
And you said you weren't afraid. You were just fascinated with it all. Well, that attests to your adventurous spirit.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the yellow cab. Your family owned yellow cab, and where were they located?
They were on Bridge Street. We had just a little bitty building. And anywhere in town was 50 cents. Yeah, that was nice. Munson State was operating at that time. And we had a lot of nurses who would take the cab every morning. Automatically, we had a route that would pick them up and take them up there.
And then at age 18, what happened?
I really couldn't see myself ever getting a really good job around here. And so I said, I'll join the service. And I have to go where they send me so nobody can get upset. Yes, so I did join the Air Force at that age. The train was still running, so I took the train into Springfield, and then I was assigned to Lackland and for Air Force Base.
Where is Lackland?
San Antonio, Texas. So we went from Springfield into New York, and that's when we caught our commercial flight to Texas.
And then you went on to communications training?
I was at Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I was there from November till February, all the nice weather.
You got permanently stationed where?
I was sent to Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama, and that was a good, pretty good duty there, except for being in Alabama, which was not a lot of fun in the 50s, but, you know, we survived.
You mentioned something about the separate facilities and things like that. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, of course, the service was not segregated, so I had a roommate who was a black lady, a gal, and we were fine, you know, we had no problem. And a lot of times I had a car. If I was going downtown and she was going downtown, I'd give her a ride. Well, the air policeman at the main gate turned me in because that was a very risky thing to do, because the only way that she was able to ride in my car was sitting in the back seat as a servant capacity. So that was how, you know, that was how we did it. So I had to stop taking her down. And my base commander called me in, and, you know, he said, I realize you're not from here, and this is not the way you are used to things, but he said, you cannot do it. It is too dangerous. So I had to stop giving her a ride. But then we had some time off, and she said, well, I have an aunt in Savannah, Georgia. And I said, okay, let's go see her, you know. So we got the chow hall to give us food, so we didn't have to stop, because now we're in a situation that could get bad, you know. And we drove at night, because then people would just see two people in the car. And we got down there, and they were really, really nice. And we stayed over, you know, a couple of days with them, and then went back, and it was a nice trip.
You re-enlisted again. You went overseas.
I went to England, and I was stationed at South Ruislip, and it was a small base, and they really were administrative. We had no planes or anything like that. But we also had a place at West Ruislip, and that had a landing strip, but it was not a long one. So they transferred me to the switchboard because they needed to have somebody that they could say, you, go there, you know. They couldn't do that because all the rest was civilians. So they had to have one one person there that they could say that to. So this one day they sent me over to West Ruislip because somebody hadn't shown up over there. And everything in the buildings rattled, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, what happened was this was a commercial plane that was coming in for landing at London Airport. And they gave him the configuration to come in, and they said, you'll see a water tower on your left, and right after that is the runway. Well, that was great, but except that the water tower here was for West Ruislip, and it was not for the commercial landing. So they came down on West Ruislip, and they were running out of runway. And they put everything on, brakes, reverse engines, the whole bit. That whole base was rattling. And so they got the plane stopped, and they offloaded everybody on buses and took them out. And they said to the guy, you got the plane in there, now you get it out. And so here we go again with all the rest, as he revved that engine up as high as it would go, and he just went straight up, you know. It was a kind of a wild day.
So you were about 2 years in London,
Yeah, almost 3, actually.
and then you returned to Massachusetts.
Yeah, I decided to not re-enlist again. Yeah, I came back here, and what I learned in the service transferred into one of the companies, Mass Mutual Insurance. It transferred to their equipment. So I went to work for them for a while. I had a friend, she and her husband had moved to California. And I thought, well, I've never seen California, let's go out there. I did find a job fairly quickly. That was in the San Fernando Valley. Actually in North Hollywood was where I was. Hydrodyne is the company that I went to work for. I worked on the switchboard, and the production manager came through one day, and I said, Jim, I don't have enough to do. So he went out and he got a bunch of parts, brought them back, showed me how to package them. So I started doing that as well. Rocketdyne was our biggest customer for space shuttle parts. Yeah, we made a lot of parts for the space shuttle. And of course, Rocketdyne being the prime manufacturer of the engines, that's where our parts came in. Because when the space shuttle, when they need to change the trajectory of where they're going, they set off a very tiny explosion. They have seals that are here and here, and when they set off, they go together, they set off the explosion, and then they separate again. So that's how they changed their direction. I learned all kinds of useless stuff. I worked for Hydrodyne for like 28 years. I went from switchboard operator to sales to inventory control to shipping and receiving, truck dispatching, and quality control supervisor. So I kind of went up the line there.
You got to know the business from the ground up.
Yeah, and then I kind of had it with California. And so I looked for the most area and the least people. And that turned out to be Montana. Unfortunately, that was not the place to go.
Limited job opportunities.
Very limited, yeah. I did anything I could because I really liked it there. So I loaded everything into a 14-foot U-Haul, hooked my truck on a trailer behind it, brought my 2 dogs, and came back to Palmer.
Now you retired in...
About 2000. I took 30 days off because I'd never been able to do that. And then I decided that I had to have a purpose because I'm not used to not doing anything. So I went out looking for a volunteer, and I went to the library because I love to read, so it was a logical place. So I went to the library. It was Helene O'Connor, who happened to be on the desk that day. And so I said I was, looking for volunteer work. Did she have anything? And she said, yeah. And so she called me when I got home. And I worked there volunteered and worked for 20 years. Yeah.
What are some of the tasks you had while you were volunteering?
I usually volunteered 2 days a week. The one day I would do the whole first floor because that was the busiest place because it had the new books on it and stuff. So more people traveled through there. And then I would work for a librarian 1 day a week.
Tell me about your experiences with the patrons.
Oh, they were really great. And I had so much fun with them, And they would ask for book recommendations. I'd pick my favorite authors, and I'd say, well, this author is really great. Have you tried it? And they'd say, no. I said, you got to try that one. And I got a lot of people reading people they had never read before. So that was kind of fun. They would come back and ask, are there any more of her books in here? When I was volunteering at the library, they also came and asked me if I would volunteer for English as a second language at the literacy volunteers, which was upstairs. And so I did that for a couple of years. That was interesting, too.
Now, when COVID hit, how did that affect your life in general? What did you do to stay busy?
That was really nasty because, you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't do anything. And it was a very, very hard time, really, because I couldn't volunteer anymore because the library was closed. And you couldn't really go anywhere because you didn't want to get infected. And, so it was just isolation, really. I read a lot. And because I've always been a big reader, I didn't always have the time to indulge it. So I had the time then. So I read a lot of books.
I noticed your pin.
That's my Silver Snoopy. They take these pins and they put them on a space shuttle flight and they actually fly them into space. And then when they come back, then they award the pin to the various people that they've chosen. And an astronaut actually comes and pins this on you. Yeah, it's really a big deal because they don't give that many of these away. It's kind of a big honor, but it's for contributing to the safety of the space flight.
And then you did that at Hydrodyne, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting. You have a piece of history there.
I was amazed when they called my name out when they came.
Well, it's been great meeting you, Beverly. Thanks for taking the time, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks again.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure.
This has been another recording of Palmer Village's Palmer Voices, brought to you by the Palmer Public Library in collaboration with the Leo S. Walsh Foundation, MPAC TV, Palmer Historical and Cultural Center, Palmer Historical Commission, Palmer Cultural Council, Mass Cultural Council, and Elbow Plantation Historical Society. To become a part of tomorrow's History Today, contact the Palmer Public Library to share your Palmer story. If you know someone whose story should be preserved, we'd love to hear about it. For more information, visit our website at palmerlibrary.org/palmervoices.